Hey pals, welcome to a new video. Today, I wanted to be talking about Aseprite, particularly Aseprite export workflows and things that I've been picking up over the years, including tips to use the interface and custom scripting to allow you to export your work from Aseprite into your game engine or wherever you need it to go in such a way that allows you to cut down on lost time and avoid workflows that actually force you into doing things multiple times, right? We want to cut out all that repetition and increase feedback. So let's get into it, shall we? So the first thing that I want to get out of the way is if you haven't watched my Aseprite 30-minute crash course video and you're new to Aseprite, definitely go check that out before proceeding with this video. If you have used Aseprite for a while or you've seen the video, welcome. So I basically wanted to just give a quick refresher on Aseprite just to set the scene on the different kinds of projects that you might be working with, right? Very common things. So one is a project with lots of layers. Okay, you can create new layers with Shift N, and I do this very frequently, right? If I'm creating, say, some kind of environment, I might start putting down a sky on a single layer, and then directly after that, I'll make a new layer, Shift N, straight away. And then if I'm putting some grass down, that'll come down next, and I've got a couple of layers here, whatever. And then if I want to put something on this, I'll immediately Shift N, and I'll start working on my tree or whatever it is. Okay, this workflow, the point of this is to avoid destructive edits. Okay, destructive edits are whenever you do something that undoes a previous command or input that you've created. And in this case, if this was all in one layer, if the tree was bound to the rest of the work, then if I wanted to move the tree, I'd have to select all the pixels that related to the tree, and I would move the tree and I'd be creating this lovely transparent issue with the background, and I'd have to paint over it. You don't want to do that, right? So working with layers is one way to preserve the work that you do and allow you to mold and manipulate your work very quickly. Okay, so I'll just, for the sake of the video, make this a little prettier. Okay, it's a great start. It's very rough. One thing that you will note is that none of these layers have names. And when I'm working in this very sketchy part of the process and I'm just trying to figure out, what my shapes are and just lay things down, I don't usually name these layers straight away. Normally what I'll do is just use the move tool, which is V on the keyboard, and click the thing that I want to move around. Okay, doing that allows me to basically get to whatever layer I want without having to worry about the name of the layer. Not to say that you shouldn't be naming layers, it's just a handy way of getting around early without bogging down the process, right? If you're looking away from the work to go find the layer that you want, to click it, to then come back up so that you can draw, I feel like that really slows down the workflow. And one of the key reasons why I'm making this video, my priority here is to minimize the amount of repetitive tasks or tasks that take you away from the work. And in a much bigger project, such as this one, you end up with quite a large amount of layers, okay? And even here, not all of these are named. So this work is essentially a parallax background. There are lots of layers here, and each layer has its own depth. And at every depth, I want to export a PNG. So in the game, it looks something like this, where all of these are on different layers. And you can see if you move the camera left and right, there's actual 3D depth that gets perceived, and it actually appears in the game like that. So as we move, you can see things subtly looking like there's some 3D depth. For me to achieve this effect, each of these needs to be its own image, right? You need a layer for this, you need a layer for this, you need a layer for the fountain. And if I'm editing back and forth between Aseprite and the environment to see how things fit, this is a very difficult scene for me to work in. Contrast is a real issue here that I'm working on. And I've been on it for a while now, as you've remembered if you've seen any of my previous videos. So my goal is to get as close a connection between me working and the target environment as possible. Now, with default Aseprite, really, if you're trying to do this, you kind of don't really have a lot of options here. If you export, you can export visible layers or selected layers. You can export groups, but if I want to export each of these layers or each of the groups, kind of stuck, right? We're in a situation where, okay, you got to export and then change the name and then export and then change the name. You'll be there forever. You could try, exporting. What else do we have? We have save as. No, that's not going to help you out. You're pretty much stuck here. Now, months ago, I was browsing the Aseprite forums, and I found that somebody had written a script to actually allow you to do this. It was written by Gatsby. What this does is essentially creates a bit of a batch operation, right? It's a series of functions that run after one button click. And what it does is it goes through the file, hides all of the layers, and then exports one layer at a time by turning it on, exporting, turning it off, turning the next one on, exporting, etc. I really like this script and I recommend it. For me, I actually found that my needs were one step further. Okay, so I've got, say, this building, and I've got different layers on the building, right? Different elements, but I want to export the entire building as one slide for my use case. So I've gone ahead and modified this script to work with groups as well as layers, and it only exports top level things in the tree. So anything that's not indented, it will export as one PNG. It can also ignore locked layers too. So there are things in this scene that are here just for scale, like Armin, for example. He's locked, but he's here just because I want to be able to create a reference for everything. Same thing with this blue background, right? It's just there to give me some sort of context. And the script's really cool. So all you need to do to import scripts is just open scripts folder and then just paste them in here. It's really simple. And then each script will give you an option to utilize it, essentially. So in this case, export layers mod is my version. I will just change it. You can see it working. It exported all the images and then they come out here. So one button click instead of, 20 or 30 exporting and renaming all the layers. And this lets me essentially have, certain layers inside of these buildings and bits and pieces. In this case, the ivy. I've got like the ivy and then the shadow of the ivy that was like a copied layer that I colored differently. It's only when you're doing more complicated things like animation and you're recoloring certain body parts and doing operations that must use the timeline that I use named layers 100% of the time. So let's go have a look at animation. So here's an animation file, and essentially this is a jump animation for Armin. This is based on the jump video that I put out a few months ago. And what we've got here is, if you've seen my workflow, you know that I create a lot of layers and I give them colors originally. Each body part has a different color, which allows me to move things around very easily without worrying about breaking any of the other things. So if I want to adjust things like where the character's knee is on this frame, it's very easy to just go to the frame and change things, very slightly. So in this context, I'll name them all, and that allows me to do things like go to the torso and just recolor the entire thing with Shift R. I can take the color that I want, I can switch it to some other color, and then when I press OK, that applies to the entire animation. So for batch operations like that, yeah, of course you want to name the layers. Now, what happens if you have projects with multiple animations? So I'll show you another file, which is currently work in progress. This one has lots of layers and lots of frames, okay? So in this context, I'm not actually past the draft phase here. This is like super duper early. So I've just got like messy silhouettes for a lot of these animations. And I haven't gone to the stage of, isolating each of the elements. I've got the layers there, like here, you can see this version of the animation here has like a big swipe. And you can see I've got different colors for different body parts. And I've only really got the body parts that I need to see the animation first, just to get the timing right. And in this context, like there's so much going on here, right? It's huge. How would I manage all of this if I wasn't able to see it all in the one file? Like imagine if I had to export each of these animations from their own Aseprite file. How would I manage the scale of the enemy, the colors, that kind of thing? It all needs to be here in one file. So you can make a new frame with Alt N. So Shift N is new layers, Alt N is new frames. And you can also create these tags, if you've noticed. The tags are really, really important. The way to create a new tag, I'll just go to a different file here. If I make a few frames, take all of the frames that you want by clicking and dragging along the numbers, right click, new tag. This will automatically give you the from and to, so the first frame and the last frame, and then just give it a name. So like idle for an idle animation. What's cool about tags is if you have, say, multiple of them, when you press enter, it will only preview the currently selected tag. So from the frame that you start in, if you press enter, it will iterate through that. Why this is useful, of course, is I can then do things like looking at this get up animation or this grab animation, specifically things that need to loop, right? So a run, it's really important to have that in one tag so that I can watch it loop from the last frame to the first frame. But this tagging system can also be used to make exporting faster if you have a script for it. I was doing a little bit of complaining to the developer of Aseprite, one of the developers, David, and he wrote me this little script that's called tags to sheets, which is awesome. And clicking this button essentially will take all of the tags that I've got and export them into PNGs. So single sprite sheets per animation. To do this by default, like if we were trying to just export this with Aseprite's default functionality, what you normally get stuck on is you can create, a horizontal strip, or you can create, multiple rows or columns, and you can create them based on the tags. I believe you can split tags here, and you can select, the things that you want. But as far as I understand, if you do this, so all frames, split tags by rows, hopefully, one sprite for each tag, that looks right. So what this feature does is gives you a new row for every tag that you create. Now this looks like it's going to solve our problem, but if you use Unity, there is a problem here. The problem is, if I take this and I want to make this a multiple sprite and read write enabled, apply that, we'll go to the sprite editor and we'll go and review this. If I want to do some kind of splitting of this down into different animations, then I'm going to need to slice it. And if I'm going to slice it, what this will do is it will slice them into an array. So now I have all of my animations, sure. The problem is that this process does not know where one animation ends and another begins. And that's super critical, because if I go now back to frame 1 and I add a frame so that this is 0, 1, 2, 3, this becomes 3, but this one used to be 3. So if I start putting these into different animation scriptable objects or whatever I want, the actual index of each of the images will be shifted forward for every image after the new frame that I've added. And that totally messes up the entire workflow. You'll start getting frames from the wrong animations in the wrong files because none of these are actually referenced in a hard way. Like this frame is whatever number of frames there are before it, right? It's an index. So this is like the 20th frame or whatever, 23. Well, if we add something before, well, now it's frame 24. So you definitely need to separate these into their own PNGs. You can't just export them as one big image as if you were downloading it from like a sprite website. That only works if those amount of sprites will never change, okay? So if you're working with Aseprite, it's really important to be able to test your animations in the game while you're still roughing them out. I can fight this enemy right now. So when I'm playing the game, I'm testing with these dummy animations, right? I'm testing with really, really simple blocked out drafts. And the reason for that is I want to see if those animations are good or not. Do I need an extra frame here? Do I want to cut some stuff? Do I want to change where the arm is on this frame? Does it have the right amount of power behind it? That kind of stuff needs to be done. And so we need different PNGs per animation, and we want to do that in one go. So this script by David essentially just does that in one go. Export tags to sheets, makes every single tag its own PNG, done. Really, really handy. Those two scripts get me through like most of my exporting. Being able to take things, put them in a group and layer them per group is really great. And then making tags for animations is also really great. And it's one button for every time I want to do that. Super handy because it lets me go back and like check things without having to get anxious about the fact that, oh no, if I want to export this and test it in the game, I'm going to have to do some process of like exporting 20 different things. You never want to be in that mindset. There's one other script that has come out very recently, only last month, that I want to show you, and it's for 3D modeling. Say we are in Blender and we want to do pixel art textures on our 3D models. Normally, in order to have this workflow work at all, we would need to have a PNG that lives in our file system somewhere, that's open in Aseprite and open here being used to texture a model. And the workflow is essentially draw some stuff in Aseprite, press save, hopefully it maps correctly to your UV, and then go back to Aseprite and try again. It's really, really messy and takes a lot of time. So this character is a character from Final Fantasy 3 on the DS that I ripped and recolored to test this out, and it was pretty successful. Now the magic here is coming from a script called Pribambase, and it comes from Lampy Sprites on Twitter. You can see it working in action here, and I'm going to show you very quickly how it works. Essentially, you have the UV from Blender imported into Aseprite Live, and the actual sprite that you work on then updates immediately in Blender from Aseprite. And it cuts out all of the question about, oh, are these pixels on the arm or are they part of the shirt? Or is this where the head is or is that the foot? So for those of you who use 3D, this is going to be interesting to you. Essentially, say you've come in here and you've created your character and you've created the UV map for the character. Essentially what you'll have is this big image with the UV map applied to it. Okay, so all of these triangles and bits and pieces, these represent like surfaces, right? So we've got the clothes and the belt buckle in this case, the hat, bits and pieces. You can see those here, right? Like this is the hat and this is the feet. It's very unintuitive, the 3D workflow for me. I'm not very proficient in it, but I'm just getting started. So in order to make this work, you'll have to open the file in Aseprite, go to connect under the sync menu in the tools, and then in Aseprite, if you press file sync, you'll get this menu and it'll say sync on. From here, you're synced. So we have our texture map here. We just go sprite, send UV, and this will give you some options. Press OK. And in Aseprite, you will actually see the UV being applied. So now I can actually see the map and I can see which pixels relate to what. So this is the cuff of the sleeve, and if I want to change the color of this, then I can do like a nice line through here. And what's cool is that in Blender, this is being applied in real time. So this line I just created is now here. You can see it applied. I didn't have to save anything to make that happen. But essentially, I can come through here and I can undo that. You can see it being undone there. And let's say I want to do a nice recolor. So I originally recolored this to be blue, but now I'll recolor it back to be red. There we go. Lovely. Now we have a red mage instead of a blue mage. All in real time. Super handy. You know, I can go and do the same thing with the face, whatever we want, the shoes. And let's go a little darker. Nice. So now our shoes are a little more brown. I could go even darker than that, to be honest. Very good. So there you go. Pribambase. It's an awesome way for getting really fast feedback to and from Aseprite and Blender. And I think I'll be using this one day. I'm not sure to what extent I'll be going through the motions of applying 3D to my pixel art, but I'm very interested in this art style. It speaks to me from just my upbringing. I love the DS, and early 3D games on the N64 and the PlayStation were the games that I grew up playing. So something about pixel art being applied to low poly 3D really speaks to me. And I hope this video has spoken to you. If you have any other requests for workflow related tips in Aseprite, feel free to let me know in the comments. And I will be posting the 3 scripts that I spoke about today. That's tags to sheets, export layers mod, and Pribambase in the description below. So Thank you for watching. As always, I've been Adam, you've been the Pixel Pals. This has been Indie Tales. Until next time. Hey pal, thanks for watching, and thanks most especially to the patrons and Twitch subs who support this channel and my game dev project Insignia. To find out more, click the links in the description below. And if you like this video, tell YouTube by clicking the like button, and then YouTube will tell me, and then I'll make more videos. That's nice. Thanks again, and until next time.